These are the updated and best Call of Duty settings that you need to be using. Whether it's MW3 or Warzone right now, or maybe you're preparing for the Black Ops 6 beta, these have been tested and compared to my previously rave review video 4 months ago. And there hasn't been a whole bunch to change, but there are a few key changes that you need to keep out as you watch through this entire video. So I'm going to be injecting myself into this video of the changes that you need to be aware of, but also keep in mind, a lot of times the game makes changes for us, especially even in hidden things like the config file, which I had set to read only, ended up getting changed. So you need to go through everything from the graphics drivers to the monitor settings, to the NVIDIA control panel settings, to the graphics, the controller, the keyboard and mouse, even more. Follow with me step by step in this time-stamped video. Make sure to drop a like and make sure to check out the sponsor of today's video, FPS Hub. They have went through with me on every single one of these settings over the past few months, and they are dialed in on what is the best settings for all things Warzone. And if you want, this video will get you about 50 to 70% of the way there to your max performance, but you're not unlocking your total system performance unless you work with someone like this who's going to help you get your CPU, your RAM, and your GPU all running at the max possible performance. And that doesn't mean the max temperature. They can lower your voltages, they can raise your frequencies, and optimize based on your specific system to get the best performance, the best stability, to help expand that lifespan, both in terms of duration, but also in terms of the performance that you're getting out of the specs that you have. If you're interested, check out the sponsor of today's video, FPS Hub. They are a brand sponsor, and they've been working with not only members of the community, but also dozens of pros within the Warzone scene. They are becoming like the most trusted name in the game. They'll be linked down in the pinned comment and the description. And if you want, they also have some tunes as well to help you bring out that audio, because we all know footstep audio is pretty rough in this game. But I've been using the FPS Hub audio tune, and it's working really great for me as well. Without further ado, we're going to jump into the video. You're going to see me injecting myself into the video and giving updates where critical changes have happened with the NVIDIA control panel settings, maybe some in-game settings, and make sure to follow step by step, because once again, your previous settings may have changed, and this is a great sanity check to continue out the rest of the Warzone season and get us especially ready if you're watching this early for the Black Ops 6 beta coming later this week, and it'll be running for 10 days. A lot of these settings, especially the baseline settings of your NVIDIA control panel, monitor, etc., will be a great foundation for when we drop into Black Ops 6 beta. I will have an updated settings video for that, but we will only cover the in-game stuff for that. This will always be the baseline for all things graphics, drivers, etc. So without further ado, let's jump right into the settings. Now, we want to make sure we are looking at the same settings menu. So when you get to the main menu, go into the Battle Royale segment. Even if you're a multiplayer player, if you go into the multiplayer menu, some of the settings will be in different orders. They will carry over from multiplayer to Warzone, but just so that way you don't have to hunt and search if the settings get in different orders, join me over here on Battle Royale. Okay, then we're going to go up and we're going to go into controller. From there, look at this testimonial on screen. I promise you, so many people complain about, my aim assist doesn't stick like that. Well, it's probably because, one, you aren't activating rotational aim assist, but more importantly, your settings are incorrect. Okay, so follow me through step by step on this. Controller, we're gonna have set to controller. The default button layout, we have set to default. We've talked about in a previous video how you can use tactical. If you're interested in that, you can check out my previous movement video. From there, controller vibration turned off because we don't want the controller shaking while we're trying to aim. And here's where the money is made. Dead zone inputs, okay? Bring down your left stick and your right stick dead zones because they default to 10. Bring them down to 2, 2, maybe 3, 3, 4, 4, whatever you feel comfortable with. Some people recommend going all the way to 0, 0. And the reason is rotational aim assist is not active unless we are actively strafing. There's so many videos out there showing people not even touching their right stick, but strafing with their left stick, and it just holds on to their opponent. So what we do is we throw that left stick min and that right stick min lower. I recommend about 2 to 4. Some people bring it all the way down to 0. So that way, technically, you always have a little bit of left stick drift. You always have a little bit of right stick drift. So that way, even just the slightest movement is resulting in you moving in game. And more importantly, you are passively always getting rotational aim assist. For me, I recommend leaving mine around 2-2. I'm a disciplined player when it comes to using and abusing rotational aim assist, as all players should on controller. I'm sorry, mouse and key players, it's just the truth, okay? Don't get mad at me for it. But what you also can do, not only use those to get more rotational aim assist, but bring in your left stick max and start bringing that down. The reason is we need to activate tactical sprint fast to get up and get going, right? Well, that relies on us getting that left stick forward past a certain threshold. Well, if we bring our left stick max down to 70%, that means we only have to bring our left stick up to 70% in order for it to get that max movement. Now, I would suggest starting at something like 90 and then bringing it down to 80 and then bringing it down to 70 or whatever you feel comfortable. But basically, this means you have to move that left stick not as far forward in order to activate tactical sprint, which can make those sprint outs feel a little bit more snappy. From there, the right stick max I have set to 99. Left triggers I don't have messed with. And once again, for the SCUF Envision, there's some stuff here we'll change in the IQ software later on. That will be at the end of today's video. For there, we're going to go into the aiming. I have mine set to 6.8. I would suggest that for all beginner players. If it's a little bit too fast, bring down your horizontal stick sensitivity and your vertical stick sensitivity. But this is a really good starting point for most players. Sensitivity multipliers, I'm not touching any of those, not touching any of the aim axes. I'm leaving all of those the same. But I am making sure I switch to dynamic. The combination of a low dead zone and dynamic aim response curve absolutely changes the game. And even at the highest levels, like CDL level pros are like, I hate dynamic aim assist. Everyone shoots super straight. Everyone shoots nukes. And honestly, you got to take advantage of it too. From there, I'm not messing around with the aim assist ADS sensitivity multiplier whenever I'm focused. Everything else is off for custom sensitivities. Make sure you have your aim assist on. And then aim assist I have set to default. Some people play around with Black Ops. I don't think it makes any substantial difference. Pretty much all high level players just leave it on default. ADS aim assist we want to make sure we have on, and then I'm not messing with any motion sensor behavior stuff. Over on the gameplay, we have automatic tactical sprint turned on because we want those faster sprint outs, faster slide cancels. Slide maintain sprint we want to have off because it both causes dead slides and it causes issues with like automatic mantling, which we don't want. Auto move forward, we have off. Tactical sprint behavior, we want set to single tap run instead of single tap sprint. Single tap sprint is only the regular sprint. Single tap run is single tap tactical sprint, which we want. Grounded mantle, we have off. We talked about in a previous video how if you're a really high level player, you can use grounded mantle to get some rapid fast mantles. But I think the average player won't take advantage of those well, and they'll more often just end up auto mantling on accident. So if you're a super high level player, consider trying out grounded mantle. I mentioned that in a previous movement video, but I think the average player should leave it off. I leave it off because I end up auto mantling too much and that just makes me lose full. Automatic airborne mantle we have off. Grounded mantle we have off. Slide dive behavior I have set to hybrid for a multitude of reasons. One, I use the SCUF Envision, which allows me to have keyboard binds on this controller. So I have paddles on the back of this controller that I have bound specifically to dive. Now that is a luxury that only the SCUF Envision has. Okay, without further ado, let's get in. The plunging underwater I have set to free. Parachute automatic behavior I have turned off because I want to pull my chute manually. Sprinting door bash I have turned on. Ledge climb behavior I have set to mantle only. Everything else here is pretty much set to standard, except I do want to go to interact. I want to make sure I have set to prioritize interact. That way I can tap to open chests, tap to get into vehicles, tap to open doors, but I can still tap to reload. But if there's also things around me, I can hold to reload and still tap. I think most players run prioritize interact. Also a small one here, weapon mount exit delay. I suggest setting that to instant. So that way, as we move off an object that we're mounted on, there's not a short, medium, or long delay. Like I want to get off instantly in the event that I am mounted. This is just going downhill. Moving on. Armor plate behavior I have set to apply all. When I go down, I'm going to make sure I have C4 detonation set to grouped, so that way I can throw one and I can also throw another and then blow them both up by pressing the trigger. Or if I throw one, I can double tap square and it'll blow up an individual one. Depleted ammo weapon switch I have turned off because I want to make sure I am manually swapping those weapons myself. I don't want the game swapping it for me. There's a cool thing you can do here with akimbo where you set it to paired, which basically means instead of if I have two pistols in my hand, I don't have to right trigger, left trigger. I can just right trigger and it'll fire both at the same time. So what you can do is you can go left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and it'll actually fire both at the same time. So you can get a little bit of a rapid fire going on there. Vehicle camera recenter I have set to off. I have free look for the initial position. And then everything else here is pretty much set to standard. Now, at the very end of the video, I will cover both the advanced settings for the SCUF Envision, and I'll also cover mouse and keyboard. But since, unfortunately, I am a mouse and keyboard player too, that is a minority of the COD audience, we're going to jump straight into the essential graphic settings and then cover the smaller audience for the Envision players and the mouse and keyboard players at the end. Now, before we adjust any in-game settings, it's essential that we have the updated and optimal driver, because with bad drivers, we'll have texture bugs, crashes, dev errors, and the team over at FPS Hub tests all of the new drivers as they drop, and they'll both let you know what is the most optimal driver to run. And oftentimes we kind of got to go back a couple of versions to get the most stable one until Call of Duty ends up catching up. Now, I'm going to tell you the most stable one that we're using right now to get my performance, but if you're ever curious, you can hit me up over on Twitch and I'll tell you what current driver I'm using as well. Of course, the team over at FPS Hub will keep you updated as well. So for the most current drivers that I'm using, simply go in, type in NVIDIA drivers into Google. It'll bring up GeForce drivers. From there, you're going to get onto this page and you're going to select whatever GPU that you have. So simply open up your task manager, go over to performance, and then inside of performance, you can see specifically what GPU you have, and you'll see I have the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090. For the same thing later on, you can also check what CPU you have. That information is there. From there, we're going to type GeForce. We're going to select GeForce, whatever the series of GPU you have. Make sure you select for notebooks, that's laptops, and then for regular is desktop. Select your GPU, select your operating systems. I'm on Windows 11, and then you're going to click Start Search. That's going to bring down this search menu. And what we have found, the team over at FPS Hub, and from my personal experience as well, we are currently rocking driver version 556.12. Sometimes the game will yell at you and be like, you need to be on the most recent ones. Well, most recent ones, you end up becoming the beta tester, and they're oftentimes unstable. So we are currently rocking 556.12. That's what I'm using to get incredible performance in game. I'm getting upwards of 300 FPS in 4K without any frame generation. It's running extremely smooth for me. I'm running 556.12. We're going to download that. I only download the driver. I don't download GeForce Experience because that just adds a whole bunch of bloat onto your system. 556.12. Now, I will put up on screen right now if there is an optimized version of AMD drivers that is kind of tested and vetted. We're talking right now with all the guys from the FPS Hub team. Right now, it kind of seems hit or miss depending on what your specific system configuration is. Unfortunately, that's something right now you've been kind of beta testing with AMD. Their drivers aren't very good with Warzone, but I'll let you know if there's a absolute one you must use on screen. Otherwise, it's just kind of going to be trial and error for you. As you boot up Call of Duty for the first time after installing those new NVIDIA drivers, it will probably have to go through the process of preloading your shaders. So just let that sit up there. If you see that progress happening up in your top left, don't change any of your settings yet. And in fact, I'm going to remind you now, but also remind you later, after you update all of your settings, you're going to go through and you're going to click this button right here that says Restart Shaders Preloading. It is so important as you change a whole bunch of settings, or even maybe if your game is feeling a little bit sluggish, something feels off, hit Restart Shaders Preloading. You will then exit your app, you will restart your app, and once you open up Call of Duty again, you'll hear your PC kind of whirring up, you'll hear a progress up here of 0 to 100%, and once that's done, the actual new settings will have fully applied. Sometimes, and I don't know why the game doesn't force it, you can change individual settings, but unless you restart the shaders, it doesn't actually take effect. Don't ask me why. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the settings. For this, I'm going to play in full screen exclusive. That's what I would encourage all players to do. The game runs the best on exclusive. From there, I'm rocking the PG32 UCGM, which is Asus 4K, 240 hertz OLED monitor. It's the best monitor in the market, in my opinion. And if you're rocking something like a 4080 or 4090, you have the horsepower to consider gaming on 4K, and I'm floored. I absolutely love this monitor. Okay, I have my screen refresh rate set to 240 hertz. Make sure you have it set to the highest possible. Display resolution, make sure it matches what you know that your monitor is. In my case, it is 4K. We're going to talk about monitor settings here in a moment when we get over to the NVIDIA control panel. So if something seems wrong here, double check some settings that I'm going to mention over there in a moment. Once again, restart pre-shaders. Anytime we do settings changes, make sure you tag this and reset your app and reload those shaders, but don't do it right now because we have a lot of settings to change. Brightness, I have mine set to 55 to help bring out some of those dark shadows. And then we get to NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency. This is so important, okay? You're gonna either want this set to on or on plus boost. It's dependent on whether or not you are CPU bound or GPU bound. Okay, it sounds pretty cosmic, but let me walk you through it real quick. You're gonna go to your interface. You're gonna scroll down to where it says telemetry. You're going to go to show more, and you're going to make sure your graphics card time and your CPU time are set on. From then, you're going to load into a match, just a plunder match anywhere, load into the map. Do not do this in the pregame lobby, or do not do this in this menu lobby, because it's not accurate to what you're actually doing. But as you can see from my gameplay in the background, I am usually just a little bit GPU bound because I game in 4K, oftentimes at higher resolutions. In these, it's pretty dang close, but if you are GPU bound, you're gonna have it set to on. If you are CPU bound, meaning that when you're in the map, your CPU number is higher, it's taking longer for your CPU to render the frame than your GPU, well, you're gonna set it to on plus boost. Okay, it's gonna cause a little bit more of a power draw, but it allows that GPU to always be ready for whenever that CPU does produce that frame. It'll help reduce some hitching, it'll help the game feel a lot more snappy and smooth. So GPU bound on, CPU bound on plus boost. From there, the eco mode preset, we're gonna have set to custom, though I don't notice any difference when changing between the three of these. We're gonna make sure we have VSync turned off. Custom frame rate limit, we're gonna have set to unlimited. For the menu resolution, I have mine set to native because I like my menu, especially since I do so many settings videos, to look as clean as I possibly can. Pause game rendering, we have off. Focus mode, we have set to 0. HDR, I have set to automatic. I am not using HDR. And then let's get over into the quality setting. Now, it's so important. I have gone through, I've benchmarked all of these, and yes, you could set everything to very low. It will absolutely make your game run a little bit faster, but so many of these are going to give you more information because it's going to give you more detail, and more importantly, it's going to make your game actually look beautiful without torching your FPS. Okay, so that's the goal. Your game's going to look beautiful, but you're still going to have 98% of the frames that you would get without your game looking like crap at everything very low. Make sense? Okay, so the graphic preset, we're gonna have set to custom. Render resolution, we want set to 100. Dynamic resolution, turn off, okay? We do not want that messing around. And then notice, we're not doing, even though I'm getting 300 FPS in 4K, we're not doing any frame sampling, frame generation. It's native. And we're using Fidelity FX Cast set to strength of 90. Fidelity FX Cast will help everything look a little bit sharper, which helps bring out some of the outlines of your enemies and will help spot them inside of bushes, around corners, and dark areas. I use that to help sharpen my game, which is really essential for an FPS. From there, we're not going to use any of the path or ray tracing. For VRAM target scale, we do have an update here. I used to suggest bringing it down to 50 because there was this issue with the texture bug where the game would look like Play-Doh and everything would be really washed out. They largely have fixed that. I haven't seen it in months, and I am rocking my VRAM target scale at 90 and not having any issues. If you start getting any stutters or any graphics bugs, you may consider bringing that all the way down to 50. It typically doesn't affect frame rate. It just affects sometimes some rendering issues. But right now I'm running at 90 and I haven't had any issues. And most of my peers have switched from 50 back up to 90. Variable rate shading is so important. Set this to on. It does not add any additional input latency. And also it helps out with your frame rate pretty substantially. And I can't notice any visual degradation of quality. This is a huge, I did this in Rebirth Island the other day and legitimately gained 30 frames like that as I was testing it back and forth. Keep variable rate shading on. As you can see there in the background, they've got comparisons from the team over at FPS Hub. Once again, they have ran benchmarks on all these. These settings are absolutely optimized. It is not just some random YouTuber spewing crap at you. Make sure, once again, we are not putting in any of this frame generation crap because we don't want any of that additional input latency. From there, texture resolution, we're going to have set to normal. Once again, you could bring that all the way down to very low, but you only lose a minute amount of frames by setting it to normal. Your game will look better, your guns will look better, and it's not going to torch your performance. I promise you, there are many settings that will kill your performance. This is not one of them. Texture filter anisotropic also is one of those where you actually get a substantial amount of quality increase, but it doesn't affect your frames like at all. So go ahead and throw that up to high. Depth of field, we want off because not only does it hurt our performance, but it also makes our game look like crap. Detail quality level actually does affect your game quality, so I like to keep mine around normal, but for the focus of performance, I keep it on low. Particle resolution torches FPS, especially around explosions. Keep that to very low. Bullet impacts we want on. I do, at least because I like to do recoil pattern testing, which I use the bullet impacts. Persistent effects we want to have off. Shader quality I have set to low. It does look really cool, especially with some shiny objects, to see all that reflection and added detail, but it murders your FPS, okay? So I keep my shaders on low. Fortunately, it used to be that we would have to have our shaders set to medium or high for our gun camos to look good. That is not the case anymore. Your gun camos look fine. You can keep this on low. For on-demand texture streaming, we used to be able to turn this completely off, but for some reason in the most recent update, we can only put minimal or optimized. Now, I had the FPS Hub team. I told them, hey, there's a new setting. Please test everything that you possibly can to give me the variables so I can tell the Academy what is best. Now, they went through and they tested it. They both limited their internet speed so that way they could see if anyone had worse internet, if it would affect it. They had max full speed fiber to see if that would affect it. They tried optimized, they tried minimal, they tried min settings, max settings, download limits, everything. And in every single variable that they tested, it was inconsequential. They had benchmarks that were so tight together. Sometimes some would be worse, sometimes they'd be better. It's largely completely inconsequential in every variability that we've tested. So they said for best practice, just put it to optimized and put it all the way as low as you can. If I find out any additional information on this, that'll be available in the pinned comment. As always, I put any changes or add-ons to settings videos. If I discover anything new, you can check the pinned comment. But right now, after all the testing, the FPS Hub team, we did our due diligence, tried to put it for people who maybe didn't have the best internet or the best system. We tried all variables and we can't find anything consequential. So we have on-demand texture streaming set to optimized and local texture streaming quality set to low. Shadow quality we have set to normal. Shadows It will hurt your FPS a little bit to set it to normal, but I think it's worth it because if you run around the map with it set to very low or low, it looks rough. I would not encourage you to set it to very low. Screen space shadows, I want to have set off. It does make the game look a little bit more atmospheric, but at the end of the day, as I'm trying to distinguish enemies, I want as little detail, extra flair as I can. So I think it looks really clean, but I keep it off. If you're looking for something a little bit more cinematic, you can try that. The rest of this stuff, though, absolutely not. Like some of these things I would like maybe consider. The rest of these, hell no. Ambient, screen space, static, tessellation, volumetric, weather grid, all that stuff, low or off as low as you possibly can. Now, let's get into our view. I have my field of view set to 120 so I can see as wide as possible. But I have my ADS field of view set to affected so that way I'm not zooming in super close. Whenever I zoom in, it also makes my gun have less visual recoil as well. Same thing with the weapon field of view set to wide. That gun becomes smaller in your screen, which makes the shaking appear less erratic, which makes your gun recoil feel less erratic as well. Third person field of view I have set to 90 and vehicle field of view I have set to wide. World motion blur, all that motion blur, film grain, turn all that crap off. First person camera movement, so as we're running and we're jumping around, we don't want our camera moving around. We have that set to least for both first and third person. Spectator camera, we have set to game perspective because I don't need that little helmet camera thing. I don't know why they wasted dev hours on that, but they did. Inverted flashbang, I have set to off. If you don't like your screen turning white and you want it to turn black instead when you get flashbang, you can set that to on. And then parachute camera perspective, I have set to first person. Now, before we forget, now that we've changed all those settings, we're going to go to our display. We're going to go to restart shaders preloading, and then we're going to hit restart. That means next time we restart our app, it will restart the shaders preloading. It might take, a couple minutes, 5 minutes, but we really want that to make sure all of these settings have made effect. Now, let's get into the audio and the interface settings. For the audio settings, I've actually started using the FPS Hub audio tune. I'm kind of back and forth between Arts and FPS Hubs, which ones I like more, but regardless, they both help clamp down on the super loud airstrikes, the super loud gunfire, and help you to hear the audio that you need to hear. Now, once again, these have all been approved for tournament use by Activision. If they wanted to ban these softwares, there was all this information online about these open guides of how people use this. This has been de facto approved, not even de facto, like explicitly approved by members of the Activision team. So if they end up getting rid of any of this stuff, I don't care. I hope they do, because I think they should just have better baseline audio. But while it's being openly approved for use, you're missing out if you're not either using Arts Tune or FPS Hub's tune. So all of mine is set up specifically for this tune. If you have Arts Tune or the FPS Hub tune, it's going to be set in a very specific way. But if you don't have that tune, try this. We're going to go in, and regardless of what you have set, I have my dialogue volume brought all the way down to 20. That's the enemy UAV. The gulag is closed. Whatever crap he's whispering in your ear as you're trying to hear footsteps, I can't stand listening to it. I have him brought down. Definitely make sure you have the gameplay music volume brought down and the cinematic and the war tracks, because I need to be fully focused on the effects, which is the people running around me. From there, I have voice chat volume brought down pretty far as well, so that way I make sure, yes, I can hear other people, but they're not going to block my sound of footsteps. Everything else you can have set to your personal standard. I like hearing all the last words, proximity chat, etc. Some people like turning it all off. And then I have all of mine set up. That's all personal preference based off of your individual setup. Only thing I would suggest is reduced tinnitus sound. I have on. That's the sound of the really high-pitched screeching around explosions. I have that turned on so you don't hear that. And then the war tracks as passengers, I have turned off. Juggernaut, I have turned off. And some people have started messing around with, instead of Modern Warfare, they're throwing on Classic, which could be fun, but that's totally up to you. So once again, if you were just baseline this, I would suggest running headphones. If you want really legitimately incredible footstep audio, check out Art is War on YouTube, or check out the sponsor of today's video that a lot of people are using as well, FPS Hub. They'll help you set up the audio tune, and it's pretty dang impressive what they've done to help save your ears from insanely loud explosions and gunfires while still allowing you to hear gunfire. Hey, from there, let's get into the interface settings. This is really important, especially for colors, surprisingly. Okay, so subtitles, you can set that as you see fit, but we're gonna go down to color customization. From there, I've gone through and I've manually selected the colors that I think are the most bright and vibrant. And you can kind of set that up how you see fit based off of what, colors you like best. Some people go crazy on these. I just generally pick the same colors and make sure I have the brightest variant of red, green, yellow, blue, etc. But go down, go to color filter and set your color filter to 2. Then set your color filter target to both, and then your world color intensity set to 100 each. Okay, that by default is going to make your game look incredible just by bringing out some of the blues and the vibrancy, and I think that makes the game look a lot better. Now, we have something else that we're going to change on the color settings, but that'll be over in the Windows section, so make sure to hang around. We do want to change a few more things on interface before we finish up here, though, okay? We're going to make sure our minimap shape is set to square because we want the most information. The minimap rotation we have set to on. I keep the compass on up top, and then I have my crosshairs set to static. As we move across the map and we jump and we strafe, our crosshairs will actually sway off from center, and I hate that, especially when I'm playing mouse and key. It makes it so difficult for me to accurately track because I can't keep up with the crosshair. Now, yes, it is actually accurate. As that crosshair is swaying, that's where your actual bullet is going, but it causes like, and it's so dumb. It literally says it reduces motion sickness, but does not accurately represent the direction of fire. I don't know what they're doing. They're slowly getting rid a lot of this Infinity Ward crap, but I keep mine on static because it helps out my tracking and it makes my game feel more responsive. I would encourage you to do the same. Simply click on it and open it up to static. I keep the crosshair dot on and the center dot off. From there, everything else is pretty much set to standard. I bring it down to telemetry, and the things that I keep on are FPS counter, server latency, packet loss, GPU time, and CPU time. That way, if I ever see like a major like hitch or spike where my frames are going down, I can look at my CPU time or my GPU time and maybe figure out if there's something wrong with either one of those. For the connection meter, I have turned on because for the longest time, the latency meter wasn't working up top. And then everything else I have set to pretty much standard, obviously skipping the introduction movie because I want to get into game faster. I have tips turned off and tool tips turned off. But ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the in-game settings. Let's go ahead and get into really important Windows settings, NVIDIA control panel settings, and especially the config settings to help this game run its best. Now, a super important disclaimer, okay? I mentioned this over in my console video, and it saved multiple people who didn't realize they weren't setting up their monitor correctly. Do not skip this part, okay? Just real quick, double check. After today's video, I want you to go up and I want you to look up your individual monitor's ID, like the actual product ID, the serial number, and I want you to go through on YouTube and double check the best settings. A lot of people make dedicated monitor reviews where they tell you the best settings for gaming that's going to have the least input latency, the least amount of ghosting, and most importantly, what port and what cable to use. Because oftentimes these modern monitors will only support the max refresh rate if you're using it on HDMI instead of DisplayPort, or vice versa. Or it only supports it if you're using HDMI 2.1, but most people are only using HDMI 2.0 cables. So double check, make sure you have the settings set up to do the least amount of ghosting, the lowest input latency, having the highest refresh rate, and then you're using the correct cable and the correct port, because oftentimes you'll have two HDMI ports, but only one of those ports supports the maximum resolution and refresh rate. So don't waste your money. You bought the monitor, just do a quick sanity check after today's video, especially if the settings that we're about to go through don't reflect what you think your monitor should be able to do. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to first open up our display options. Now, I'm using Windows 11. If you're using Windows 10, it's largely the same steps. I'm actually using a stripped down version of Windows 11 that gets rid of a lot of the background processes that affect your gaming performance. So from switching from Windows 10 to Windows 11, I was shocked, like 15% performance, and this runs like a dream. I've got a lot of buddies that are running off this Spectre like stripped down Windows, and it's running really, really well. So if you want FPS Hub, you can talk to them about that. But you're going to right click, you're going to go to display settings. That's going to open up this window right here. We're also going to right click, go to show more options, and then open up your NVIDIA control panel. If you don't have that, make sure you've downloaded your drivers. From there, we can double check and make sure everything looks correct dependent on our monitor. So for me, I can go to advanced display, I can go to my PG32 UCDM, and I can see that I have selected my refresh rate of 240 Hertz. Make sure that is displaying correctly. If it's not, you can either change it here, but sometimes you need to go into your NVIDIA control panel. You're going to click the change resolution button, and then you're going to select your specific monitor. So this is my Asus monitor right here. And if I were to be up here selecting 4K, it would only allow me to select 60 Hertz. So oftentimes you need to scroll down to where it says PC, and then you can select your full refresh rate. My other monitor is actually my Elgato capture card, which I have running at 60 Hertz, and then I am cloning that display via OBS. Now, in the future, I'll be able to clone via a capture card and not take this, 10%, 5% performance hit that we mentioned in the beginning of this video. But for now, I have OBS running in the background. That is a streamer content creator problem. you won't have that performance hit. So make sure we have it all set up correctly. From there, we're gonna actually make our colors look a little bit better. Now, you guys know in the past, I used to use Artist Wars filters, but Artist Wars filters, when you go to 4K, actually impact your FPS. When I was gaming at 1440p, his filters that I would run, the things that make my game look like this and much more vibrant in game, it would not affect my FPS. When I switch to 4K, it absolutely does. So I no longer run Artist Wars filters. I simply use the interface settings that we mentioned earlier, and then I go into my adjust desktop color settings and I bring my digital vibrance up to 70% on both my Elgato and my gaming PC. From there, that allows me to both have the colors that I want by the interface and then the digital vibrance. And then on my monitor, I boost the black levels a little bit to help bring out those shadows. So it's kind of the benefit of all of them. And then on my streaming PC, I apply that LUT to make the game look especially vibrant. But for me, I no longer run those filters because they were having a significant impact on my FPS when I switched to 4K. For some of you maintaining on 1440p and 1080p, it might not be an issue for you at all. But I would encourage you, after you run all these settings, if you are still running arts filters, to double check with them off and with them on to see how much it is impacting your FPS. So now that we have our refresh rate set correct, we have a resolution set correct, and now we have the digital vibrance to make the game feel a little bit more vibrant, and you can adjust that as you see fit. It has no impact on FPS whatsoever. Let's go ahead and adjust some of our power settings. We're gonna go up here to manage 3D settings, and we're gonna go ahead and check through every single one of these boxes. Go ahead, I'm gonna have my editor zoom in and make sure you check through all of these. Some of these may be in different orders for you, but I have image sharpening off, ambient occlusion off, anisotropic filtering off, anti-aliasing, FXIA off, gamma correction on, anti-aliasing mode off. Can't change any of those. Going down to background application off, CUDA cores all CUDA driver default, low latency on, max frame rate off, monitor technology fixed, monitor multi-frame sampled off, OpenGL auto. I'm using the NVIDIA GTX 4090, so I manually selected my GPU. Power management mode I have set to prefer maximum performance. For the preferred refresh rate, application controlled, shader cache size, driver default, anisotropic sample on, negative LOD, allow, quality, high performance, trilinear on, threaded optimization on, triple buffering off, vertical sync off, virtual reality pre-render frame 1, virtual reality off, and Vulkan OpenGL is set to auto. Once you change any of these, you're gonna have to go down to the bottom. For example, I'll just go ahead and change one of these and go down to the bottom and click apply. Obviously, I'm not going to change any of these because my settings are locked in. So make sure to click apply, and then we're done with the NVIDIA control panel. Now let's get into the Windows settings that we need to change. All you need to do is press your Windows key and type in the word game. From there, you're gonna go to game mode settings, and we're gonna make sure that we have game mode turned on. Then we're gonna type in, once again, the word game bar, and you're gonna open up our game bar settings. Now, I do not have the option to turn it off, but we wanna make sure we turn off game bar. So game mode on, game bar off. I don't have it because, once again, I'm running that stripped down version of Windows 11 that helps prevent all those background processes from making my game run like crap. So I don't have that option. It's already stripped out game bar. I don't even have the option to use it. From there, we're gonna once again go in and we're gonna type in the word graphics. We're gonna go to graphics settings. We're gonna go to change default graphics settings, and we're gonna make sure we have hardware accelerated GPU scheduling turned on. Now, in 99% of the cases, this is better for players to be using inside of Warzone, but after you change this setting, if you notice that there are any issues with your PC, set it to off and then reset your PC. So after we change all these Windows settings, and obviously we have these shaders waiting to preload over on the Call of Duty side that will restart those shaders, I want you to reset your PC after you change all of these settings. So when you install your drivers, reset. When you install when you change all the COD settings, restart the shader installation. And if you change anything here in your NVIDIA control panel or in your Windows settings, reset your PC as well, just to make sure everything is taking effect. But right now, game mode on, game bar off, hardware accelerated GPU scheduling on. And finally, the last one we need to change for our Windows settings is our power plan. So you're gonna type in the word power, you're gonna go to choose power plan, and for me, I have Bitsum highest performance. That's once again a unique option that I have through the optimizations that I've had done, but for you, simply click highest performance. In general, that will get the most performance out of your PC. If you are running any of these CPUs on screen right now, you need to actually go back and turn game bar on, and then instead of one of the high performance mode, you're gonna turn the balanced mode on. That has to do with the CCDs and the core parking. These are specific to these CPUs, but if you're using any of these CPUs on screen, follow the instructions, game bar on, and use the balanced power plan instead. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost done. The last thing we need to do is a real quick and real easy edit to the config file. It's gonna help the game run smoother and have less visual clutter. But before we do that, if you're appreciating all of this free value Okay, this is both insight from the team at FPS Hub and insight from me over years of optimizing my graphic settings. Do me a favor, drop a like on this video, share it with your friends because you don't want your friends lagging, having jitter, having low FPS in game. You want them having the same benefit. And most importantly, subscribe for even more. And a special shout out to those of you who have been dropping super chats lately and dropping subscriptions or memberships here on YouTube and helping supporting the full-time content dream. I'm trying to do the best to make the best content I can for you, so I appreciate all the love. Without further ado, let's get into the config file changes we need to make. So we're going to open up our file explorer. We're going to go over to documents. We're going to go to Call of Duty, players, and then options.4.cod23.cst. Now this will open up via your notepad or whatever notepad software that you have. And then from there, we're going to go type Control F and then type in the word blood. Now, to be clear, this is basically like an advanced graphics thing that you can change here. People change config files throughout all of Warzone history and throughout all other FPSs to make their game run smoother. And also, in this case, if you don't like dismemberment, blood, gore, you can actually disable that by typing the word false. This is actually really nice because as you're shooting at someone in Warzone and that blood splatters, it actually can obscure your enemy a little bit and make them harder to see. So we turn that off. The next thing that we're going to type in is brass. Weapon eject brass we're going to have set to false because once again, we don't want resources set to those brass casings coming off our gun. And perhaps more importantly, the visual clutter could distract us from seeing. The next thing that we're going to set is cascade. When you go to cascade, it's going to bring up quality level of shadows from the sun at a distance. Sun shadow cascade. We're going to copy this from the letter L to the closed parenthesis. And then we're going to paste that right here inside of the quotation marks. And that's basically going to make it to where the game is taking less resources to render those shadows, which will make the game run better for you and put more performance elsewhere. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to type in the word reflection. And we're going to go down to reflection probe relighting update stages. Once again, more resources put towards lighting. We're going to type in the letter 1 there, or the number 1 there, to bring the least amount of resources to that. And as you guys saw from my game earlier, it looks stunning. It's just not wasting resources on all this other crap. The next thing that we're going to type in is renderer. Okay, and that's going to bring you to a very common one that people have been changing in COD for years, and it is the renderer worker count. Now this one's going to be a little bit cosmic, but based on the number of P cores or performance cores you have for your CPU, you're going to take that number and then -1. So in my case, I had the Intel 13900K. So if you don't know what to do, you can simply go in, you can type in Intel 13900K, you can go onto Intel's site, and you can look and see at the number of performance cores, and you will see that I have 8. So in my case, I will subtract 1, and that is what I have put in here, and it will help the game run the smoothest and have the least amount of crashes. That, once again, is something you need to look up for your specific CPU. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to type in here is the word heaps. And it's going to bring us to GPU upload heaps. Enables optimizations when resizable bar is supported by uploading more data to the VRAM. Now, to determine whether or not you need to set this to true or false, it's all based off of the same conversation we had earlier on whether or not you are GPU or CPU bound. If you are GPU bound, typically playing in these higher resolutions like 4K or maybe even 1440, depending on your GPU, you're going to want to have it set to true. If you're more CPU bound, you're going to have GPU upload heaps set to false. I game in 4K, so I definitely am GPU bound, and so I have true GPU uploads heaps set to true. You can set this to false if you are CPU bound, and you actually don't need to go into your BIOS. I thought you did need to go into your BIOS to change this. This actually overrides what you have set in the BIOS when you launch the game. But as you guys can see in the video in the background, there is a big difference for where you set this. So make sure if you are GPU bound, you're going to set this to true. And if you are CPU bound, you're going to set this to false. Now, I know that gets a little bit complex. And as I mentioned, this is a guide to get the most out of your PC. And if you don't want to think about it, you don't want to get all cosmic, the team over at FPS Hub will literally remote into your PC and do it for you, okay? But as you've made all these changes and you've set GPU upload heaps set to true or false based off of whether or not you are 1080, 1440p, or in my case, 4K, you're just going to press File, Save, close on out of it, close on out of everything, and then now you're done. But once again, there's so much more that you can do. You can get things like an optimized Windows 11 that is fully clean and mint for gaming. You can go through and get your GPU either overclocked or underclocked depending on stability. Your CPU, oh my gosh, the voltages can be lowered so it runs cooler, which means a longer life cycle, but then we can also adjust the timings in the clocks so it runs faster. The exact same thing with your memory, bringing that voltage down, but adjusting the timing specifically so that way you get the max performance, because as you see in the background, depending on your RAM timing, you will have better performance. The team over at FPS Hub will help you out. You likely spent 2-3 grand on your PC. I've tried to give you as much free value as I can. There's only so much I can do. Okay, go ahead and check them out. You can use code Isaac in the pinned comment or the description to get the most out of your PC. Money back guarantee. But if you spent 2, 3, 4 grand on your PC, it might be worth spending $100 just to check out to see if oftentimes software optimizations will get you more FPS than hundreds of dollars in new hardware. So maybe you should consider that. But for those of you that are interested, we are going to cover the mouse and keyboard settings, and we are going to cover the Envision settings. If you are finished here, make sure to check out FPS Hub in the link in the pinned comment in the description if you want to. But most importantly, reset your PC. Make sure you have reinstalled your shaders. And if you have any questions, hit me up over on Twitch or comment down below. If you have any vouchers for FPS Hub, hit them up down below. And on your way out the door, do me a favor and drop a like, because I have spent so much time on this video. Instead of, like a lot of people, just clipping and shipping their basic settings, we went through the weeds on this one. And I really hope it helps out as much as I've helped out in previous settings videos. But without further ado, let's get into my mouse and keyboard settings, because you guys know I used to be a mouse and keyboard competitor. And then finally, we'll cover the Envision settings as well. So let's go into the mouse and keyboard settings. My aiming input device is set to mouse. My mouse sensitivity is set to 2.6, and then my DPI is set to 1600. So basically what that allows me to do is, with what is for me one comfortable swipe, it is a 360, and that's how I play every single game. Whenever I set my sensitivity up, whenever I do one swipe, that's a 360. So I always know I can do a quick 360 quick scope, or I can do like a fast 180. And then my sensitivity, no matter what game I play, is always going to be the same, because I have my mouse sensitivity set to whatever one flick of the wrist is for me. It is a 360. That's how I have mine set. Yours can be totally different based off of how you play the game, but that's how I build mine. From there, I don't do any additional sensitivity stuff here. A lot of people end up going in and they get really granular and they try to mess with like the yaw settings. Most players that were vouching for that have switched back from it. They said it didn't make any difference there at all. ADS sensitivity type I have set to relative. I know you technically should be changing your monitor coefficient, but I've been built off of 1.33 for years, and so I go ahead and I keep that there as well. I don't have a custom sensitivity per zoom. Mouse calibration, I have not done any of that. And then over on keybinds, we've got some more options as well. I do not have a custom sensitivity per zoom. I'm not messing with any of these other things, and I have not done anything different in the mouse calibration section. I know some people would actually adjust the mouse wheel delay potentially to have the mouse wheel trigger act a little bit faster, but I haven't played around with that too much. For keybinds, I basically have a pretty standard keybind, but for those of you that might be struggling with some good keybinds, here's what I would suggest, okay? So for me, I have auto move forward set to G. So basically I can tap that and I can run across the map. For prone dive, I have prone set to my right mouse button. Okay, don't ignore that right there. That's for the SCUF Envision. But my rear mouse button, that's prone. My front mouse button is set to ping. So that way I can aim and ping, and then I can also drop shot and aim all with my right hand. For crouch slide, I use left control. Some people like to use C, but that's not for me. Interact, I have set to F. Open parachute is set to standard. Basically, I'm only going to cover the things that are different. Over on the advanced settings, I have cut parachute set to left control, because you need that as well, because that is not the default setting. That dive there is simply set for my SCUF Envision. Don't worry about that. Last stand give up, I have set to left control as well, because basically when you rebind from C, you need to rebind all the other ones from C as well. Moving down, I have next weapon set to both 1 and 2. So basically, when I press 1 and 2, it will automatically swap over. My weapon mount is set to the Z key. I had that unbound for something else I was testing. Weapon inspect is set to T. Melee is set to E. And then lethal equipment is actually set to pressing down my center mouse wheel. So that way I can press down my center mouse wheel, aim, and then release, and it makes it really easy for me to throw nades, throw thermites, throw throwing knives. For me, that's a very fluid option. Armor plate I have set to 4, so it's 1, 2 to switch weapon, and then 4 for me to throw on some plates. And then inside the combat advanced keybinds, I don't have anything messed with in here. If I was playing multiplayer, I would have to tool around with some of that. Vehicle advanced keybinds, I basically have everything else set to the same. I made the drift and handbrake on the rear mouse button, so that way it's kind of like prone handbrake. For me, it kind of works out well whenever I think about it. And then everything else is largely set to the same. Descend, I have set to the rear mouse button as well, just because in my mind, that rear mouse button is going down. So that's why I have that set. Moving on, I have my scoreboard and my backpack set to tab. Ping wheel, once again, is set to, not the ping wheel, the actual ping itself is set to the front mouse button. And then everything else is largely set the same, except where I have mute sound and disconnect and channel set to 6 and 5. So if I press 6, my game is muted, and I press 5, my disconnect from like the sound of people in prox chat. If people start saying some wild stuff, I'll press 5, and that'll pull me out from there. Nothing else is changed inside of here, but there is some very important stuff over on the gameplay segment. Okay, so you got to make sure whenever you're going through some of this, always open up some of these smaller sub menus, because for mouse and key, there's a lot of options. Crouch behavior, I have set to toggle. So when I press left control, I'm standing up and down. Whenever prone, though, if I'm proning, I want to prone. I will press the prone button. It'll slam me to prone. And if I want to get up, I will press the space bar to stand up. I have automatic tactical sprint turned on. Slide maintain sprint turned off because there's some issues with dead slides there. Single tap run turned on because that is single tap tactical sprint as opposed to single tap regular sprint. Close backpack on sprint, I have turned on. Walk behavior set to hold. And I turn off all the automatic mantles because for me, it causes a lot of issues with auto mantling. You can get pretty technical. You can do some really cool stuff with grounded mantle. A lot of really high level players rock grounded mantle, but in general, I think the average player would auto mantle too much and won't like it. Slide dive activation, I have set to independent. That way, when I press left control, I slide. And when I press the rear mouse button, I dive. And so it works out really well for me where that back prone button is also my dive input based off of the movement settings that we set earlier. I don't have anything set in the movement advanced settings. There's nothing here that I would really change. I changed this to free as opposed to trigger. And then everything else is, I also set this typically ledge climb behavior is set to mantle only, not movement based. I set that to mantle only. Moving down from there, parachute automatic behavior. We want to make sure that's set to off so we don't accident, it doesn't pull our chute automatically. We want to manually pull it. Once again, no changes there. In the manual settings, everything else here is largely set to your own personal preference. Aim down sight, I have set to hold. Focus behavior, I've set to hold. Equipment behavior, hold. One thing that I did end up changing is depleted ammo weapon switch. I don't like the game switching weapons for me. I'm always keeping track of how much ammo I have left down in my bottom right. So I have that set to off. Tac stance activation, I have set to ADS plus melee. Armor plate behavior, definitely make sure you have that set to apply all. Quick C4 detonation, unfortunately, and I was seeing like some veterans like Breadman and Huskers try to change this. There's not a good way that they can find to throw one C4 and then blow up a single C4. What they've been having to do, unlike, controller players who can just double tap square, they're not really finding a way to double tap F or get the C4 to blow up. Hopefully they end up patching that, but for right now I have it set to grouped. Combat advanced settings, I have the weapon switch wraparound set to on, but honestly, I just press 1 and 2. I don't switch via my scroll wheel. Sprint cancels reload, I have turned on. Weapon mount exit delay, I want instant because if I'm mounted on something and I move, I want to instantly pull off of that. And then a fun one that we talked about earlier is the Kimbo behavior I have set to paired. Basically, if you press the left mouse button, it'll shoot both guns. And if you press the right mouse button, it'll shoot both guns. So you can actually like rapid fire and shoot both guns at the same time and actually get a lot of fire off. Moving on from there, free look activation is always enabled. I make sure the vehicle camera recenter is set to off because I don't like the game pulling my camera for me. Outside of that, this is a very, very, very important one, okay? Backpack behavior set to hold. That means, have you ever been like rummaging around in your backpack and then someone comes through and you have to like reach up and press the escape key and you end up dying? You leave it to hold. So basically you have to hold the tab key, you manipulate your backpack, and then if someone comes and is threatening you, you simply release that tab key, and now you're no longer stuck inside your backpack. I don't understand why that's not the default, but you will get stuck if you have it set to the default, which is toggle, and I hate it.
There's good code, slow code, bad code, and broken code. Good code is good, we don't touch that. But for everything else, there's Sentry. Whether you're a mobile, back-end, front-end, or any end developer, we'll show you the environment, device, OS, even the commit that introduced an error, down to the broken line of code. If it's still unclear what happened, that's a bummer. But we can show you a video-like recreation of what your user saw when an error occurred, so you'll know exactly what went wrong. Yet the woes of a developer go far beyond when code is broken, it's also when code is slow. Detect endpoints, slow spans, and operations consuming the most time across your stack and keep everyone feeling not bad.
Okay, outside of that, I have everything else pretty much set. Once again, in-game statistics set to hold, scoreboard set to hold. I have all of them set to hold because I do not like the toggle. From there, all this can be set to your personal preference, but that wraps up my mouse and key settings. If you're curious about what I'm using the ROG Azoth, which is a custom keyboard from the Asus ROG team. Unbelievable quality. We've given away a lot of these. It is like heavy aluminum base, about as nice as a keyboard as you can get, and the reviews for it are raving. And then my mouse is the ROG Harp Ace, which is a lightweight gaming mouse as well, and I really like it. But now let's get on to the SCUF Envision settings. So by now, you should have already gone through and adjusted all of your controller settings. I shouldn't have to go through that. But what I will have you do if you run the SCUF Envision is go through your gameplay settings and match every single setting that you have set over in your controller setting to here on mouse and keyboard as well, okay? That way there's no issues with any potential crosstalk. Make sure you go through every single one of these, change things like automatic airborne mantle, grounded mantle, set all of that to exactly what you have set over on your controller settings, okay? Once you've done that, there are a couple settings you need to change as well. The very first one that we're gonna change in mouse and keyboard is slide dive activation. We're gonna have that set to independent. That's gonna allow us to have both a keyboard for slide and a keybind for dive, which we're gonna set up here in a moment. And then we're gonna go up to where it says prone behavior, and we're gonna set that to go to. That's gonna allow us, when we set a dedicated keybind for prone, for us to slam down to prone instead of toggling back and forth from prone. From there, we're gonna go to our keybinds, and I'm gonna show you how I have my SCUF set up. We're going to show you the Envision here in a moment, the actual Envision settings, but we need to set up odd Warzone settings first, okay? So inside of my keybinds, when I go down, I have auto move forward. I have that set to the G key. I'll actually end up rebinding that. From there, I have prone dive set to right bracket, and I would encourage you to set that as well. And then we're going to go into move and advanced settings, and we're going to go down to dive, and I have dive set to left bracket. And then a few more things that we're going to change is I'm actually going to go all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to go to menu advanced. And the reason I do this is I really like to use my Envision to mute game and also mute voice chat. So I have mute sound set to 6 and disconnect from channel set to 5. And then finally, just in case you didn't change it from your controller settings earlier, we're going to go in, we're going to go to gameplay, and we're going to set our slide dive behavior set to hybrid. Now you can obviously change up all those keybinds as you see necessary, but this is how I set up my game prior to setting things up in the IQ/Envision software. So let's go ahead and jump over there and take a look at that right now. So here we have the IQ software, and I'll be the first to admit that I have hated this software in the past. In my dedicated Envision review, I hated how the IQ software would crash, which would basically take away a lot of the features that I bought the Envision for. However, they've been updating both the firmware for the controller and the software for IQ, and I haven't crashed once in like the past 3 or 4 weeks. So make sure, if you haven't in a while, you're going to go in here, you're going to go up to the settings, you're going to go to software updates and hit check for updates on all of these. The exact same time, you're going to go over here and click check for updates on firmware as well. It might take a couple resets of your PC, but make sure you do that. And if you ever have any issues with your controller, let's say, stick drift, or maybe something feels off. There was one time it was kind of weird where like I had my thumbsticks and it showed my thumbstick was like down here. It showed that my thumbstick was like perpetually in this position. I'm like, that's not right. Granted, I've been testing around with a lot of like experimental softwares with IQ to test out and, quality control some of the stuff that comes down the pipeline to you guys. But if you ever have any issues with your controller, even if you have the latest version, you can force update, and that will force update the most recent firmware version. And a lot of times that can solve some issues you're having with your Envision. All that being said, before we get into the mappings, let's cover some other things, okay? The triggers. I think by default, they are set too low. They're set to like 3 or 4 or something, and sometimes that'll cause unintentional trigger pulls, which you don't want. I have mine set to 8 on both, and it doesn't really matter because they're digital triggers, so you definitely will get the full actuation. But see how there's kind of like some shake happening right there? I think that's natural, but I need it to be a lot higher so that way I don't ever accidentally shoot. Okay, same thing can be said for the thumbsticks. I bring my dead zone all the way down to 0, and I set my response curve to linear. I set my response curve in game to dynamic, but I leave it in linear in IQ. I set my dead zone in game to like 2 or 4, but I set my dead zone on IQ to 0, right? I don't want these conflicting with each other. I basically want the IQ software to be out of the picture, except for the mappings. So that's why we're making these changes. From there, vibration, I have mine set all the way to 0 because I don't like any vibration as I'm shooting my gun. And then brightness, I have set to max. Auto shut off, I have turned off. Eco mode, I have turned off, and I have the most up-to-date firmware. Lighting effects, I have my static color, but you can totally set that up to you. Let's get into the mappings. So specifically, we're going to do the mappings, not the hardware mappings. The The hardware mappings are what would happen if you were to unplug this controller and you didn't have access to the IQ. Those would be the default settings, but you can't change everything with those, but you can with the regular mappings, okay? So with the regular mappings, we're gonna go ahead and start building out our custom one, and you'll see exactly how I would set mine up. So first and foremost, I wanna go ahead and set up my regular paddles. So I'm gonna set up a regular action key. I'm gonna choose the right outer paddle, and that's my jump paddle. I'm gonna choose another action key. I'll choose the left outer paddle, and that will be my crouch key. Now let's start to get into things a little bit more fancy. I'm gonna set up my keyboard key, and then I'm going to choose the right inner paddle, and I'm gonna set that to dive, which would be my left bracket. So then for me, on my right hand, I am jumping with my right outer paddle, and I am diving with my right inner paddle. So basically my right side of my brain, or my right hand, is thinking jump and dive. And on the other side, I'm gonna set this key to the prone key, which is the right bracket, right here. So now on my left hand, I am crouching and drop shotting. Right hand, jumping and diving. So that's kind of how I have it mapped in my brain. Now let's go ahead and map these side action buttons. So we're once again gonna add a new key. And for this one, I'm gonna throw on a D-pad key, and I'm gonna select the left outer paddle. So that way, or the left side action button. So that way, as I'm pressing L2, I can also simultaneously squeeze this, which would result in me pinging. Now, I still find myself bringing over my front finger for a front claw, but that's just because that's what I used before the SCUF Envision was a thing, so I haven't rewired my brain. But that is an option if you want. From there, we have another mapping that we can change where I'm gonna go in, and on my right side action button, I use it for push to talk. So I'm gonna grab a keyboard keybind, I'm gonna bind it to that right side action button, and then my push to talk is the P key. Now, moving forward, what I like to do is I like to bind these G keys specifically for those audio cue things that we were talking about. So one of the G keys is gonna be bound to the keyboard key of 5, which disconnects me from the channel so I don't have to listen to other people talk. Then I'm gonna do the exact same thing, bind another one of these keys to the key 6, which mutes the game. So that way, if I'm ever like, walking away from my setup or whatever it may be, I can press any of those hotkeys, and that will take away all of that noise that, otherwise is distracting or just obnoxious. And then finally, the last key that I end up binding is once again another keyboard key. It's this button right here, and I set it to the G key, which basically allows me to tap that once, and if I ever need to like talk to Chad or get, be busy, I don't have to hold forward on my left stick. I can use that G key as my auto run key. But that is how I have my Envision mapped out. Now, it is very important when you guys go to test whether or not your Envision is set up correctly, you need to test it inside an actual live match. You cannot test some of these things like the dive key inside of the firing range. If you were to go inside of the firing range, you'll see things work like me pressing one of my rear paddles or crouching. Things work for jumping. But it does not work for me diving. It doesn't like advanced movement keybinds inside of the firing range. So go into a plunder game, go into a Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer private match, do anything except for sitting here inside of the firing range, because some of them will work, but some of them like diving, proning, etc. won't work. So don't get all freaked out if it's not working here inside of the firing range. You can assign the keybinds while in the main menu, but test whether they work by going into an actual live match. If you guys have any suggestions to help out fellow members of the Academy on how you're rebinding your SCUF, let us know. It could be something to help out with game, quality of life, or even, and this is a, maybe you guys couldn't rebind your G keys, not sure what's going on. You can actually go into your settings, go into the SDK, and you can work with Stream Deck to integrate these G keys. So if you're not able to find an ability to remap these G keys, what you might need to do is either block off Stream Deck, as I have, because I prefer to operate within Envision, or you can download the Stream Deck software from Elgato, because Corsair owns Elgato and SCUF, and you can actually use these G keys with your Stream Deck and do things like control lighting, switch scenes. So that is an option there as well. But you can also remap very simple keybinds to hotkeys over on Stream Deck as well. I'll go ahead and show that if you do have the Stream Deck set up. It's very, very easy for you to do. You would just simply rebind hotkeys, but I've gone ahead and I've reduced it and only use it on my Stream Deck. But I've just decided to keep everything on the IQ software, so that way I don't have to worry about messing with the Stream Deck software, but that is an option for you as well. But ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up an insanely in-depth PC settings video. I have poured everything into this video, both leveraging all of my knowledge over the years, leveraging the knowledge from the guys over at FPS Hub once again. If you have any troubles with any of this, hit up those guys. They are experts at all of this. If it went flawless and your game is running incredible, guess what? There's still so much more you can be doing when it comes to things like those BIOS settings, GPU, CPU, RAM timings, all that. We've gone through it all. But thank you all for supporting me. Thank you all for the support on the channel. The views have been absolutely incredible lately. If you guys have any questions for me, feel free to hit me up over on Twitch. That'll be linked in the description. And one more time, a huge thank you to FPS Hub for being a channel partner. It is now official. If you guys want to use code Isaac, it'll get you a discount over on your PC optimization, linked in the pinned comment and the description. I've been working with them for years, and we now are just finally making it official. And I've had so many rave reviews from members of the Academy and the work that they've done to both help out their stream, their audio, and especially their in-game performance. Hope you guys learned something new. Hope your game is running smooth, and I will see you all in the Warzone. Peace.